在通膨胀里头有一个很特别的产品叫做钢铁。钢铁在疫情之前每吨是500到800美元，然后呢，疫情的时间因为没有什么太多的建筑业跟各种建设，所以它跌到了一吨440美元，然后现在它居然卷到了每吨1995美元，涨幅140%。主要的原因除了需求，当然跟现在的生产不足有关系。另外一个原因跟美国对从全世界进到美国的钢铁都课征了25%的关税有关。美国又将在未来国会通过的基建方案里头，基础建设也会带动钢铁业的成长。钢铁在这部分的涨价是这一波非常值得注意的现象。
The coronavirus pandemic definitely had an impact on the steel industry. Now, steel producers were generally identified as essential industries, so they weren't shut down by any government action. But many of our customers saw big drops in demand. For instance, the auto industry, which buys maybe 26% of all the steel produced in the United States every year, largely shut down in the spring of 2020. And a lot of construction projects were slowed, everything. So demand for steel dropped precipitously between the middle of March and May. So much so that steel producers in the U.S. responding to that market signal did reduce production dramatically. We had a number of steel mills that shut down altogether.
We have seen with this pandemic locking things down and coming out of the lockdown was that there truly was a shortage. Buyers could not get as much steel as they required just for normal operations. Outside of nobody was able to hoard steel, nobody was able to build any inventories because the mills were limited in terms of how much of each contract they could satisfy, and they were.
担忧新冠疫情冲击经济走向衰退，美国钢铁厂2020年放缓生产，甚至暂时停产，但民众居家防疫，家电用品需求大增，钢铁需求迅速回弹。解封后，陆空交通解禁，石油和天然气等产业钢铁需求更是有增无减，供不应求下，钢价直线飙涨。
Steel prices spiked 300% over pre-pandemic levels, at one point pricing over $1,900. That's up from steel's pre-pandemic price range between $500 and $800.
A boom in steel demand.
Demand is relentless.
I think people feel like steel is just price can go higher.
I've been looking at this as probably the second biggest impact to steelmakers ever, and I think that the largest impact is World War II.
美国钢价2020年8月掉到每吨440美元低点后，开启长达1年多的攀升。2021年9月，热轧钢卷价格飙到每吨1995美元。美国这波钢铁荣景能持续多久？钢铁市场更新调查显示，80%钢铁厂主管认为钢价已达巅峰，将开始往下坡走。
Steel is one of those categories in which prices have really risen dramatically. Steel is certainly one of those examples of shortages, higher prices, growing frustration among customers.
They have turned into a bubble, and that bubble is they just go higher because they go higher. We should see prices move back, probably in a pretty violent manner.
Is that the bubble popping?
Yes, yep.
高盛10月初的分析也认为，市场条件已经改变，美国钢价预估进入下滑期，表示先前因为强劲需求和供应延迟驱动价格上涨，随着钢铁进口增加和生产力提升，未来数月将出现价格修正。高盛将美国钢铁股投资平等从持有调降至卖出。
Infrastructure package could potentially pass and send the stock soaring. A study which shows that positive steel cycles often last as long as 2 years. That means this one's probably still in its infancy.
Steel remains a key material in infrastructure projects, so the Biden administration's plan to inject billions into U.S. infrastructure will be a huge boon to the steel manufacturers.
We estimate that for every $100 billion of new investment in infrastructure, that's going to mean 5 million tons of additional steel demand.
世界钢铁协会统计显示，全球钢铁生产截至8月连续4个月下降，64国通报产量，8月总和为 1.568 亿吨，4月为 1.713 亿吨。中国依旧是全球最大钢铁生产国，产量比位居第2的印度高出8倍多。但中国在拼减碳下减产，4月开始每日产量下降 17.8%。印度、日本和美国8月产量和2020年同期相比，则是分别增加 8.2%、22.9% 和 26.8%。
2021 steel demand is expected to increase 3.8% over 2020, according to the World Steel Association.
China is easily the world's leading manufacturer of steel, so we import a lot of that and we benefit from those low prices. But again, those tariffs have been in place, and that causes prices to rise. I'm not saying those tariffs are a good thing or a bad thing. I'm simply saying that they would tend to drive up price, and they have done that.
美国前总统川普2018年对进口钢铁课征 25% 的关税，拜登政府持续沿用，也是造成钢价上涨的推手。美国进口钢铁2021年1月到8月统计增加 17.5%， 在关税遏制下，没有出现进口剧增，大量倾销，避免美国钢铁业受冲击。
We had those tariffs in place. That didn't happen. And so the industry remained healthy, was able to recover, continue its investment, and be in a strong position to meet the growing demand that we see today. So I don't know that I would say that we're in a bubble that's going to be burst. I think we're going to see continued strong demand.
美国钢铁供需失衡，引发市场恐慌，价格飙涨，被认为浮现泡沫的迹象。但新冠疫情改变消费行为，中断生产活动，打乱供应链，影响劳务和商品价格波动。随着市场调整，供需平衡，商品价格预期能回到往常水准。美国钢价也是如此。
The good news is that steel supply capacity will rise over time. The cure for high prices is high prices. So when steel prices are high, that creates an incentive for suppliers to increase output and eventually capacity. I think you're going to see that happen. And so we hopefully will see lower prices at some point in the future, even as the world continues to use more steel.